The judge sat sternly at his desk, his gaze fixed ahead as he delivered his ruling. After meticulously going through the details of asset separation, he finally directed his attention towards my now ex-wife, Alice. I hereby grant the claimant sole custody of the 3 children and order a monthly child support payment of $1,200, declared the judge. At that pronouncement, Alice leaped from her seat, embracing her attorney with elation before shooting a triumphant glance in my direction. Yes, I whispered to my own lawyer. I've maneuvered things just as I wanted. Curious as to why losing a court case could be perceived as a victory. Allow me to elucidate, but first, let's rewind to the beginning when I first encountered Alice. My name is Sam Foster, a 45-year-old mechanical engineer. Our paths crossed when I was 28 at an automotive fair. As I examined a Vanguard motorhome, I sensed someone peering over my shoulder. It was a striking young brunette, equally captivated by the vehicle's features. Quite spacious, isn't it? Almost like a small apartment, I remarked, grinning. She chuckled in agreement and said, probably more affordable, considering the skyrocketing rent prices these days. In that moment, exchanging smiles, I knew I was captivated. Taking the gamble, I extended my arm towards her. Shall we explore this wonderful home away from home? I was just thinking the same, she replied, seizing my arm, her smile capable of thawing even the coldest of icebergs. Together, we ventured towards the cooking area, adorned with its propane fridge and stove. Well, darling, I do enjoy cooking, but it seems a bit limited. Are you okay with dining on the road? I inquired, maintaining my role. As long as you can navigate the drive-thru, sweetheart, she countered with a playful smirk. Next, we inspected the modest yet functional washroom. Peering inside together, we assessed its adequacy. It's sufficient for keeping ourselves clean, I remarked. But perhaps a tad cramped for showering together, she added with a grin. Moving towards the bedroom at the rear of the vehicle, we were interrupted by the sudden appearance of the salesman. Are you folks interested in this magnificent piece of design? The salesman queried. You'll find there's plenty of room for you and maybe even a kid or 2, the salesman suggested. Not so fast. We're just exploring options for our honeymoon. The kids aren't in the picture yet, I teased, winking at the young woman. Playing along, she quipped, although we could start them right here, with a giggle. Then reaching into her side bag, she retrieved a camera, removed the lens cap, and handed it to the salesman. If you wouldn't mind, could you capture this magical moment for us? She requested. The salesman happily obliged, snapping a few photos of us, even insisting on a kiss. With smiles stretching from ear to ear, we exchanged a simple friendly kiss, our lips barely touching. Leaving the salesman with a business card and well wishes for our impending wedding, we returned to the fair floor. I found it hard to tear myself away from this captivating woman, but before suggesting a coffee or anything further, I needed to know her name. Priorities first. Hi, I'm Sam. I think we forgot the formal introduction amidst all this excitement, I said, grinning. Well, that's a change from my current situation, she replied, dousing my burgeoning interest in her with a cold shower. I have a very well-known boyfriend who would likely vanish into thin air if I started talking about engagements. My name is Alice. We exchanged handshakes, and despite learning of her relationship status, I pondered whether to ask her for coffee. After all, what harm could come from a simple coffee if she was already spoken for? The worst-case scenario was falling for her and ending up with nothing more than a friendly handshake. With that in mind, I took the plunge. Would you like to grab a coffee? I ventured. We found an empty table at the small food court and settled in with our cups of coffee. Over the course of an hour, we conversed, getting to know each other better. She shared that she was 25, fresh out of university with a degree in communications and navigating her first job. She mentioned her boyfriend, whom she had met during her university years. Curious, I probed a bit further. Does he have commitment issues? She emitted a melancholic chuckle. Well, on certain fronts. Steve is dedicated to his job. He graduated 2 years ahead of me. He's devoted to his friends, and he's committed to partying as if he were still in the frat house." She paused for a moment, contemplating. He struggles with the idea of settling down. For him, planning ahead typically involves deciding what to do next weekend. "Sorry to hear that," I offered, though the sentiment was far from genuine. The mention of Steve seemed to dampen her spirits. Shortly thereafter, she bid farewell, but not before accepting one of my business cards, with my home phone number hastily scribbled on the back, promising to stay in touch. As I made my way back to my apartment, I mentally berated myself for steering the conversation towards her boyfriend. Instead of showcasing my charm and personality, a task I was certain I excelled at, given my good looks, if I may say so myself, I had prodded at a vulnerability in her relationship. It was a regrettable move, fixating her mind on him and their situation. Yet, all was not lost from that delightful encounter. 2 months later, while at work on a Friday, my phone rang. "Hello, Sam. It's Alice, your fiancée," she announced. Well, I was starting to think you'd gotten cold feet. I was on the verge of calling off the wedding," I teased, though the laughter that followed felt somewhat forced. "I was wondering if you had plans for tonight, and if you could fit your betrothed into your schedule for a drink or two," she inquired, her voice tinged with a hint of uncertainty. "Let me consult my planner for a moment," I replied, feigning contemplation. "Is it a Jenny night?" "No, we broke up 4 months ago. Or perhaps a Wendy night." "Blast, I forgot to return her call last month." "Scratch that. Let's see. I can slot you in between Deborah and Diana. Yes, I'll be free for a few drinks tonight." I sensed a hint of hesitation on the other end of the line. "What time are you meeting Diana?" Alice finally asked. Suppressing a chuckle, I replied, "Around 7. "Oh," she sighed, disappointment seeping into her voice. "It's actually on November 25th for Thanksgiving. Diana, my mom, is expecting me promptly at 7. I might even be able to bring you along if you're available. I hope 1 month's notice is sufficient," I teased, unable to contain my amusement. "Okay, wise guy. It's a date," she retorted playfully. We arranged to meet after work at a pub midway between her place and mine. It turned out to be an unremarkable evening. We shared a few drinks, discussing a myriad of topics, but the conversation inevitably gravitated towards her and Steve, her boyfriend. Alice spoke of her aspirations to establish herself in her career over the next few years. She also mentioned her desire to have children, raise them for a few years, and then resume her career. Steve, on the other hand, envisioned a life of wealth and leisure, with little thought given to children. Over the past 4 years, she dedicated herself to transforming Steve, coaxing him towards maturity and responsibility. Yet, her efforts proved futile. Their disagreements escalated, with Steve resisting the idea of moving in together, clinging to his independence and apartment. Alice, inherently competitive, felt the sting of defeat creeping in. Nonetheless, she maintained her composure, knowing she had given her all to the fight. My initial enthusiasm dwindled within the first hour, though I attentively listened to her, offering a sympathetic ear to her grievances. I felt relief when she signaled her readiness to depart. As we stood outside the pub, waiting for a cab, she abruptly propositioned me for a nightcap at her place, her hands already exploring my body as she spoke. I'm not foolish. I understood that I could likely end up sleeping with her that very night. The temptation was there, but I also recognized that it would be a move born out of vengeance. She was well aware that Steve had opted to go carousing with his friends, likely ending up in another woman's bed. I would merely serve as a tool to maintain some semblance of equilibrium in their tumultuous relationship. "No, thank you," I asserted, choosing to be straightforward with her. "Alice, I almost enjoyed my evening with you tonight, but I refuse to let you use me as a pawn in your vendetta against Steve. Go home, come to terms with it, or find another outlet for your frustrations." I had hoped you saw something meaningful in me, but the verdict is still out on that. While I'm glad I could lend an ear, don't mistake me for a means to alleviate your pain." Even in her slightly intoxicated state, she initially seemed shocked by my words. Then her face flushed with embarrassment, a crestfallen expression clouding her features. Choosing to leave without waiting for a cab, I walked away, leaving her standing at the curb. Surprisingly, she called me the very next day to apologize for her behavior the previous night. While I sensed her sincerity, I remained terse during the conversation. 2 months later, following a Thanksgiving where I had to explain to my mother why I couldn't introduce her to the future mother of her grandchildren, Alice reached out to me again. "Hi, Stan. It's Alice. How have you been?" "Not bad. And yourself?" "Good, very good." There was a pause on the line. "And that's thanks to you. I took your advice and ended things with my boyfriend last month. This time alone has really helped clear my head." "Well, I'm glad to hear that." "Truly," I replied. "I was wondering if I could invite you out for a drink again, and I promise I won't mention my ex," she asked tentatively. "It's a tempting offer, but I have plans for this weekend. What about next weekend or sometime during the week?" There was a brief silence before she replied, "Okay, next weekend works for me." Hey, beggars can't be choosers. After how I behaved on our last date, I should be grateful you even answered my call. Her sincerity softened my stance a little. "Don't underestimate yourself, Alice. You're not just attractive, you're great company too. If I didn't have plans already, I'd be thrilled to go out with you again. By the way, we still need to finalize our guest list for the wedding," I reminded her. Her response was a giggle. "All right then, next week, same time, same place. Don't stand me up," I teased. The subsequent date was delightful. Not once did the topic of her ex come up. Instead, she inquired about my current situation. I could sense her tension when I mentioned I was seeing a colleague from work. She seemed relieved when I assured her it was nothing serious, just a comfortable friendship with benefits. She gave me an odd look but dropped the subject. This time, she didn't suggest going back to her place for a nightcap. Instead, she bid me farewell with a long, heartfelt kiss at the curb before hopping into a cab. The invitation for a nightcap came the following weekend, and there was no way I could refuse. We couldn't keep our hands off each other all the way to her place. Once inside her apartment, our embrace continued, swiftly transitioning to a horizontal position. It felt like love in its purest form. The following weekend, we rendezvoused again, this time ending up at my house. We spent the entire weekend delving deeper into each other's worlds, hardly leaving the bed except to grab a snack before returning to our cozy cocoon. As Sunday afternoon rolled around, we were just finishing a leisurely brunch when the phone interrupted our blissful bubble. I picked up, and it was Deborah, the occasional coworker I went on dates with. "Hey there, handsome. How was your weekend?" she chirped, glancing at Alice, clad in one of my shirts that barely concealed her enticing figure. I replied, "Absolutely fantastic." It was a truly splendid weekend, earning a radiant smile from Alice in return. "Well, mine was pretty lousy, to be honest. I could definitely use some good company." "What are you up to later today?" inquired Deborah. "I'm tied up with something right now, so it won't be possible. How about a rain check?" I responded, lowering my voice a notch. Alice shifted her focus back to the dishes, but I could sense her keen interest in the conversation. "You're with her?" Deborah asked. "Yeah," I confirmed. "All right then, I'll catch up on the latest gossip tomorrow at work," she said before ending the call. Alice turned towards me, her expression now a stoic mask, devoid of any emotion. I'd come to recognize it as her warpath guise. Being inherently competitive, she had mastered the art of concealing her feelings when faced with adversity, saving them for when she needed to retaliate. "Who was that on the phone?" she inquired, resuming her task of putting away the dishes. "Just Deborah from work. She wanted to know how my weekend went," I replied, not entirely truthful. Alice remained silent. Before long, we found ourselves back in the bedroom. Alice pushed me onto the bed and straddled me, her gaze intense as she rubbed herself against my now aroused member beneath the fabric of my sweatpants. With determination, she grasped my arms, lifting them above my head, and in a low, commanding tone, she declared, "You won't need her anymore. No more rain checks. From now on, I'll be all you need." Feeling the intensity of her desire and the imminent pleasure she was about to bring me, I saw no reason to argue. Indeed, over the following weeks, Alice became the cornerstone of my life, both in and out of the bedroom. Our connection was undeniable, evident in the countless photos she took to immortalize our happiness. Within a year, we exchanged vows, with me at 30 and her at 27. As planned, we spent the initial years of our marriage solidifying our careers, I as a mechanical engineer at T-Bolts Incorporated, and Alice as a creative assistant in a marketing firm. Through relentless effort, we became indispensable assets to our respective employers, and when the time felt right, we embarked on the journey of parenthood. 2 years into our marriage, we welcomed Sam Jr. into the world. Alice took a brief maternity leave, confident in the security of her position, and returned to work. Once we found a suitable nanny for Junior, she resumed her duties for less than a year before the arrival of Elizabeth, our second child, named in homage to my mother-in-law. With an established nanny already in place, Alice's maternity leave was abbreviated. Believing our family complete, we were taken by surprise when Alice unexpectedly became pregnant again, leading to the joyous arrival of little William. However, recognizing our limit, Alice underwent surgery to prevent further expansions to her family. 3 children felt like the perfect balance. Despite our focus on our careers and the presence of a live-in nanny, our children remained our top priority over the following 6 years. That's how we navigated our lives together. The final year of our marriage weighed heavily on us. Our children were blossoming, a fact documented in the myriad photos captured by Alice throughout our journey. Professionally, we were stable, yet a palpable void lingered. My love for Alice remained as fervent as the day we exchanged vows, and our trio of well-behaved children, cared for diligently by our nanny Bernilla, brought us immeasurable joy. With the kids transitioning to school and preschool, Bernilla's role had evolved into that of a household maid. One evening, as I sat watching mindless TV with the kids and Bernilla, Alice was detained at a late meeting. It struck me. What was amiss in our marriage? It wasn't the first occasion Alice had been held back by work commitments, but this time, it stirred a deeper concern. I pondered over the past months, initially attributing Alice's distance to work-related stress. I understood firsthand how professional anxieties could infiltrate personal life, persisting even during moments of familial intimacy. However, what struck me the most was her aloofness towards me, a stark contrast to her interactions with the kids or Bernilla. It became evident that our marital relationship was the crux of the issue. I racked my brain, attempting to discern any changes in my demeanor or actions that might have led to her distant behavior. What had I done to provoke her frequent outbursts towards me? For instance, just last week, I suggested a trip to the zoo with the kids. Her response was filled with disdain. "Goodness, Sam, could our lives get any more mundane? A day at the zoo. You and Bernilla can take the kids. I'll find something else to occupy myself." Her contempt towards an activity the kids cherished left me taken aback. "Darling, the kids adore going to the zoo. Why would you react this way? And why are you constantly terse with me lately? It feels like nothing I do or say meets your approval. What's wrong?" She rose from the couch and retreated to our computer room. "I feel trapped in our routine, Sam. When I look at you, I don't see a husband. I see a warden," she uttered before exiting the room. Her words couldn't have been clearer. Our marriage was on the line, and swift action was imperative. While she had voiced her discontent about the monotony of our lives over the past year, her latest accusation struck a nerve like never before. The thought lingered, was she preparing to leave? Worse yet, was she seeing someone else? The idea of her dissatisfaction with our life was already difficult to digest, The possibility of infidelity was unbearable. I resolved to do whatever it took to improve our situation and salvage our marriage. However, if she was indeed being unfaithful, that was a different ordeal altogether. I would never tolerate it. I needed certainty. On Sunday after lunch, I loaded the kids into the car alongside Pernilla, and we set off towards the zoo. 2 blocks from home, I veered into a restaurant parking lot and asked Pernilla to continue to the zoo with the kids. She agreed, though clearly perturbed by my sudden change of plans. As soon as they were out of sight, I swiftly switched to a rental car I had arranged the day prior. Just as I was about to head home, I spotted Alice's car traveling up the boulevard. Without hesitation, I followed. 10 minutes later, she arrived at an apartment building and disappeared inside. Armed with my camera, I discreetly captured a few snapshots of her entering the premises. After a brief wait, I decided to investigate further. The lobby was disheveled, marked by an overflowing wastebasket spilling discarded flyers. Rows of buzzers adorned with name tags caught my attention. As I scanned through them, one name struck me like a bolt of lightning. Steve Gray, Alice's former flame. Suddenly, pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. It became clear that she had rekindled her relationship with her ex-lover. Unlike me, burdened with the responsibilities of 3 children, a home, and the accompanying financial obligations, Steve was unencumbered, free to offer Alice the excitement and spontaneity I couldn't. In that moment, all the unanswered questions from the past months found resolution. My wife was betraying our marriage, and our union was irretrievably damaged. To say I was devastated would be an understatement. Like a man in a stupor, I staggered back to my car. While I couldn't be certain of the exact nature of the rendezvous, it was abundantly clear that this was no innocent visit. Yet, despite the overwhelming evidence, I needed definitive confirmation. Retrieving an old lighter from the glove compartment, I returned to the building, ensuring there were no security cameras in sight. I seized the overflowing wastebasket and carried it outside, setting it ablaze. With dead leaves piled on top to generate smoke, I darted back inside, pulling the fire alarm. The piercing noise echoed through the building as chaos ensued. Racing back to my car, I watched as Steve Gray emerged on his balcony, clad only in briefs. Alice followed behind him, clearly caught off guard, and hastily donning a housecoat. Seizing the opportunity, I snapped a series of incriminating photos. My anger towards Alice boiled over. As they realized it was a false alarm, they retreated inside. Seething with frustration, I eventually made my way to the zoo. Reuniting with the kids, Pernilla immediately sensed my agitation and skillfully diverted their chatter about their visit. Though I smiled outwardly, my mind churned with turmoil, and my responses remained subdued. Returning home, I made a beeline for the computer room, citing urgent work tasks as my excuse. Alice's response was a derisive snicker. I worked late into the night, waiting until I was certain Alice had drifted off to sleep before retiring to bed myself. However, sleep eluded me that night. Instead, I grappled with a whirlwind of emotions, tears, anger, and meticulous planning. Hours of introspection crystallized one undeniable truth. Witnessing Alice's return to her ex-boyfriend extinguished any lingering love I had for her. In its place festered contempt, hatred, and a plethora of revenge fantasies. My already strained affection had snapped at the mere thought of Steve Gray's apartment, suggesting it had been eroding for months, perhaps even while she was with him. The following morning, I resembled a shell of myself. Even copious cups of coffee failed to compensate for my sleepless night. Though Alice seemed to sense my disquiet, in true form, she chose to ignore it. Stepping out of the house, I made a spontaneous decision to phone work, informing them of my absence for the day. Instead, I made an unannounced visit to a friend, an attorney who graciously squeezed me into his hectic schedule. Residing in a no-fault state meant there was little point in delving further into the details of Alice's infidelity. My priority was extricating myself from the marriage as swiftly as possible. However, I harbored a clandestine scheme, a surprise for Alice. While I couldn't predict if she'd discern my plan, I fervently hoped she wouldn't. Within 2 days, all the necessary paperwork was prepared, awaiting my final approval before being served. A restraining order had also been obtained, poised to be delivered simultaneously. I meticulously executed measures to secure half of our savings and nullify all shared credit cards. When I resolved to act, I did so decisively. And this time was no exception. With no alternative, I confided in Brunilla. While she displayed little surprise upon learning of Alice's infidelity, she was deeply troubled by my intention to file for divorce imminently. I could see the anguish in her eyes at the prospect. Nonetheless, I offered reassurance that everything would ultimately fall into place. During the day, I arranged for all the door locks to be changed. As Alice arrived home, a car containing the process server sat parked at the curb. She attempted to unlock the door with her usual keys, only to find they no longer fit the new locks. After a brief moment of confusion, she pressed the doorbell. This was the cue. The process server approached her. "Alice Foster?" he inquired. "Yes," she replied. "You are hereby being served," the process server declared. Alice's expression shifted to one of astonishment as the process server proceeded to explain the contents of the documents he held. One envelope contains divorce papers, the other contains a restraining order, which stipulates that you are not to have any contact with your current husband or your children until a visitation schedule is established between your chosen lawyer and your husband's lawyer, he stated matter-of-factly. Then, as an added twist that I had incentivized with a bonus, he uttered the words I had paid him to say. "Your husband instructed me to inform you that effective immediately, your permanent address is 107 Maple Drive, apartment 204, and to kindly proceed to hell." With that, he turned on his heel and made his way back to his car. Alice stood there, watching him depart, a mixture of shock and disbelief etched across her features. Eventually, she turned towards the house and caught sight of me peering out at her through the window. In a burst of rage, she pounded on the door with her fists, unleashing her frustration. Fortunately, the kids were safely away at my parents' house with Brunilla. I cautiously cracked open the door, keeping the safety chain secured. "What do you want, cheater?" I spat out. "Let me in. This is my house," she demanded. "To hell with you, Alice. You forfeited any claim to this being your home when you betrayed me with that scumbag Steve. Go back to him and leave me and the kids in peace. You disgust me, and the kids are off limits to you," I retorted sharply. Tears streamed down Alice's cheeks as she pleaded, "Please, Sam, let me in. We need to talk for the sake of the kids. I understand your anger, and I'm sorry for causing it. But let's handle this like adults. There's no need for such drama. It will only hurt the children." Her voice strained through the small opening. "Of course, we'll handle this in a civilized manner, Alice," I responded firmly. "Given your breach of our marriage vows and deception toward both the children and myself, we have no alternative but to address this through legal channels. If you agree not to contest the divorce petition, things can proceed smoothly. Now, please remove yourself from my family's vicinity, or I will have to involve the authorities. Rest assured, I'll do so with the utmost civility," I stated, maintaining my composure. With that, I shut the door in her face and walked away. Despite her persistent knocking and pleading to be let in, I remained resolute and refrained from granting her entry. Eventually, she relented and gave up. 2 hours later, the barrage of phone calls commenced, initially from her cell phone, and then from an unknown number, presumably Steve's phone. I ignored every call. By now, Alice likely had knowledge of the contents of the divorce petition. Against my lawyer's counsel, I insisted on specific terms: full custody of our children, limited visitation rights for her once a month on the fourth Saturday under strict supervision, and a generous monthly child support payment. Additionally, I filed for divorce based on grounds of infidelity. Though my lawyer expressed reservations about these provisions, I stood firm, citing my financial backing of the legal proceedings. He argued that our state did not recognize infidelity as valid grounds for divorce and proposed citing irreconcilable differences instead. Furthermore, he believed that courts typically upheld traditional caregiving roles for women, making it unlikely for my custody request to be granted. Nevertheless, I persisted in my demands. The following week, Alice responded with full force. As expected, she contested the restraining order, and her lawyer presented a counterproposal, seeking full custody, alimony, and an equal child support payment to what I had requested. Initially, the restraining order was overturned, and the judge ruled in favor of shared custody. Through our lawyers, Alice and I managed to establish a schedule for co-parenting. Fortunately, the judge sided with me on retaining the use of our home, at least for the time being. In a moment of regrettable impulsivity, I succumbed to a fit of rage. I gathered all our family photos and albums and ignited them in our backyard fire pit. With childish fervor, I watched as the memories of our life together turned to ash, keeping only a handful of pictures of the children for myself. Alice, an avid photographer, had amassed close to 20,000 images over the course of our marriage. The bonfire raged for hours as I also deleted all digital copies from our home computer, preserving only a select few on a DVD. Subsequently, I learned from the children that Alice was furious upon discovering my actions. This revelation shed light on a heated phone call I received that Saturday, during which she cursed me and vowed retribution for my actions. Unfortunately, my erratic work schedule caused me to miss several of my designated custody days. These absences, compounded by the reliance on Alice's availability, significantly influenced the final divorce ruling. 4 months later, the divorce proceedings reached the courtroom, and it was apparent that my numerous missed custody days would heavily sway the ruling against me. As expected, I faced a resounding defeat. Alice was granted rightful custody of the children, along with a substantial child support payment. She also secured exclusive occupancy of the house, leaving me with a mere 24 hours to vacate. Despite the setback, I had 2 surprises in store for Alice. Firstly, as previously arranged between us, Bernilla departed the house with me. Alice witnessed the process of my departure, seated in a car at the curb alongside none other than Steve Gray. Upon seeing me load Bernilla's belongings into the back of the pickup truck, Alice emerged from the car, demanding an explanation. "I am leaving, Ms. Alice. I've decided to return to my homeland. I no longer wish to work for you. You've not been very kind. I'll miss the children and Mr. Foster, but I cannot continue working for you or that man," Bernilla declared, her gaze fixed firmly on the ground. With that, I opened the door of the pickup, allowing Bernilla to enter, and we drove away, leaving Alice speechless. Within minutes, Bernilla and I were settled into my new 3-bedroom apartment. From now on, she would primarily serve as my housekeeper and cook, with occasional duties as a nanny when the children visited. The second surprise unfolded 2 months post-divorce. Our company secured a contract up north, necessitating closer supervision at the worksite. Given my frequent visits, I agreed to relocate for 6 months, spanning from December to May. As a gesture of gratitude for her loyalty, I covered Bernilla's plane ticket to visit her family during this period, fulfilling her previous promise to Alice. The prospect of my prolonged absence weighed heavily on both the children and me. However, it proved even more challenging for Alice. With my consistent absence over recent months, and now the prospect of sole caregiving responsibilities for the next half year, her social life suffered a notable decline. From what I gathered, Steve never entertained the idea of moving in with her, particularly given the presence of the children. By April, they officially parted ways, with Steve finding companionship in a single blonde without children, who shared his penchant for revelry. Upon my return home at the end of May, Bernilla greeted me at the airport, exuding confidence and ardor in her attire. It was evident that her presence turned heads among the male onlookers. She leaped into my arms, embracing me tightly. "I missed you dearly, Mr. Foster," she exclaimed, "and thank you again for covering my plane ticket to visit my parents." Feeling slightly self-conscious, I couldn't help but notice the stark contrast between her youthful vibrance and my aging appearance. Yet, amidst my embarrassment, I felt a surge of warmth knowing that she was genuinely happy to see me. After all, Bernilla had been an indispensable part of our family for over a decade, providing unwavering support during the tumult of the divorce. "I missed you too very much," I replied, reciprocating her embrace. Her slender figure pressed against mine, eliciting a sense of comfort and familiarity. During our silent drive home, I couldn't shake off the earlier display of affection at the airport. Bernilla's behavior seemed unusually forward, especially considering her typically reserved demeanor. Recalling how she had begun dressing more provocatively in the months leading up to my departure, I couldn't help but wonder if her actions were suggestive of something more. As a friend and confidant who had stood by me during difficult times, I felt a responsibility to address the situation with honesty and clarity. "Bernilla, what's happening here? It seems like you're trying to seduce me, and I must admit, you're quite skilled at it. We've known each other for over a decade, and you've been an incredible support to me during my divorce with Alice. I'm truly grateful for that, but we need to be honest with each other and have an open conversation. What's going on?" I inquired, feeling a mix of confusion and concern. "You need a good wife, Mr. Foster," she responded. "Come on. Bernilla, call me Sam. You used to call me Sam often," I interjected. "Okay, Sam, you need a good wife who will take care of you and your children. Someone who will give you love and perhaps more children. I care deeply about you, Sam. I don't want to see you hurt again by that woman," Bernilla elaborated. "You mean Alice, my ex-wife?" I clarified. "Yes," she affirmed. "Why do you think she could hurt me more than she already has?" I questioned. "Well, now that she's alone again after her boyfriend left her, I'm worried she might try to reconcile with you," Bernilla explained. "And would that bother you? I thought you were saddened by our divorce," I responded. "Wouldn't you want Alice and me to reunite for the sake of the children?" I probed further. "No, my mother always told me that you're a good man and that I would make a better wife for you. If I marry you, it would be solely for you. I would strive to be better, younger, and more beautiful than her. I've witnessed your pain, Sam. I've heard you cry when everyone else was asleep. Well, that certainly caught me off guard." Bernilla's admission left me feeling a bit bewildered, realizing just how vast our cultural disparities were. Amidst her declaration, one thing stood out clearly. She desired to be my wife. Did she love me? Perhaps, but I couldn't be certain if her understanding of love aligned with the North American perspective. Nonetheless, Bernilla was a cherished friend, and I didn't want to cause her any pain. "Bernilla, I'm honored by your feelings. It's touching, truly. However, it's a bit premature for me to consider remarriage. All I want right now is to be home, with you by my side, and to have the kids around," I conveyed as gently as I could. Her revelation caught me by surprise, and I needed time to process it. Bernilla appeared deflated, recognizing my response as a rejection. I couldn't leave her feeling disheartened. "Bernilla, you've taken me by surprise, no doubt. I never realized you harbored these feelings for me. I need some time to think things over," I continued. Though disappointed, Bernilla's spirits lifted slightly as I offered reassurance. "Listen, Bernilla. You're young, beautiful, and full of life. You deserve someone closer to your age. But one thing's certain, I won't ever allow Alice back into my life. Right now, you're the most important woman to me," I affirmed. My words seemed to offer her some solace, and I hoped it provided clarity in our complex situation. Epilogue. 1 year later, Bernilla and I sat in silence on the couch, my eyes drawn to the picture hanging on the living room wall. It captured a moment from 5 years ago, when my eldest son and daughter played joyfully in the backyard, while I dozed off in a lounge chair, our youngest son nestled in my arms. I hadn't destroyed that picture. Instead, I framed it, and Alice had placed it back on the wall. As if summoned by my thoughts, I heard the familiar sound of Alice's car pulling into the driveway. The kids dashed inside, greeting us quickly before hurrying off to their rooms. "Hi, Dad." "Hi, Pernilla," Sam Jr. called out, leading the way. Alice followed closely, gracefully carrying a couple of grocery bags into the kitchen. "Sorry we're late," she apologized, her demeanor still exuding the same elegance and charm that had captivated me once upon a time. Pernilla rose from the couch and headed toward the kids' bedrooms to check on them. As she left, Alice turned her attention back to me, her gaze softening. "You look good, Sam," she remarked, a hint of nostalgia in her voice. "Every time I see the man I married all those years ago, I can't help but realize what a fool I've been." "True, but let's not forget that I had some help in opening your eyes," I quipped back. Alice chuckled softly. "If I didn't love you so much, I'd probably still be angry at how you manipulated the situation. But deep down, I know it was for the best. He would have left me eventually anyway. But leaving the kids with me, that certainly expedited the process. Less than a year, and he was gone, leaving me alone without a lover and without a husband. I wanted to hurt you," I admitted. "And you did," she conceded, "but I can't blame you for wanting to make my life as miserable as I made yours. Seeing you now so happy without me, I know this weekend without the kids will be just another lonely one." Pernilla returned, glowing with the anticipation of impending motherhood, followed closely by my 3 kids, their overnight bags and towels in tow. Pernilla and Alice shared a warm hug before our departure. "Please take good care of the kids and Sam," Alice requested. "Of course, Ms. Alice. I'll make sure they're well taken care of. We'll call you every day, and we'll bring them back next week," Pernilla assured her. As we left, I couldn't help but wonder the same thing as Alice. What would our life have been like if we had stayed together? It was a futile question, filled with wishful thinking, yet impossible to shake off entirely. We both still felt the weight of what we had lost. But for me, it was somewhat easier to move forward with my new wife and our soon-to-be-born daughter. Life moves on, regardless. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.